Welcome to Power Up, the podcast that uncovers the unique challenges women leaders face today. Join your hosts, Nat and Kristen, as we dive into the tough topics and provide actionable insights you can apply right now. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes.
I was talking to a Powrsuiter the other day, and she told me she had a career coach at one point who gave her this nugget of advice: don't try and do it all. And she was really offended because she was thinking about having kids at the time, and this person said, you're the more nurturing one, and because you're more nurturing, you'll want to spend more time with your kids, so you can't also have a career. And it got us thinking, well, that and many other pieces of advice we hear a lot of the time about the terrible career advice that women get given. So today we thought we'd cover off 5 common pieces of advice that women should really ignore.
Yeah. And I would love at some point to do a podcast on a Brene Brown quote, which is, unless someone has been in the arena, don't take advice from them. So it talks about who we should take advice from. But for the most part, women are given advice left, right, and center, like this person you were chatting with.
Yeah. And
it's well-intentioned, and it's often from that person's perspective, but it's actually harmful.
Well, they're just like tropey one-liners, or I know any parent, my sister once got given some advice by a very elderly man while she was waiting outside the school gates with her baby, being like, you shouldn't bring your baby out in this weather. And she was like, well, thank you. Should I leave my baby at home while I come and pick up my other child? And I think that sort of aligns with the arena analogy, right? Like, if you're not in it, you don't know really what you're talking about.
Well, and that doesn't sound well-intentioned. That actually sounds judgy.
Sounds pretty judgmental.
Yeah, that sounds judgy.
These are things to ignore, like we are ignoring today the sounds like gale force thunderstorm outside. We keep hearing the noise in our headphones, and so hopefully it doesn't come across. But we're going to ignore this career advice, and we're going to ignore the wind and rain outside.
Yeah, and we're actually going to focus on advice that is intended to fix women rather than addressing systemic issues. And so our best advice is to steer clear of these 5 suggestions. And I'll kick it off with one that I hear all the time, Nat, and one that a lot of people ask us if we provide, and that is to find a mentor. And we get a lot of questions. Do you have mentors? Can you match me with a mentor? Or someone says, do you have a mentor? Quite often, a lot of our community will ask in our expert interviews, did you have a mentor through your career? And it's not as though it's not great to have a mentor, because we should have a number of people around us that help steer us, assuming they've been in the arena and they've been there and they've done that, and they can help guide and give their perspective of their lens. But for the most part, that seems as though it's what companies and organizations settle on to support their women. Oh, you should go find a mentor. And actually, I did hear a Powrsuiter who said their male manager suggested she needed a mentor. And I was like, oh no, you need him to be a champion and to be your sponsor and putting you forth for promotions and amazing projects and singing your praises and raising your profile.
Yeah, so I suppose there's 2 issues with a mentor. First one is in the first word, one of anything in a world we live in a feedback drought is not always a good idea, because the role of a mentor is to give you advice and perspectives based on their experiences. And if that's the only perspective you're getting and it's one person's view, it's very easy to place too much importance on that. And I think the second challenge with it is what you said, is a mentor is a really great ally in your corner, but they are not the person who is going to be proactively finding opportunities for you and giving you a hand up, teaching you about financial acumen. Like we talk about this a lot with women who get to C-suites without having had a sponsor help them learn about financial statements or identify them for a strategic role. A mentor is, I don't want to say powerless, because they're not powerless, but they don't have a direct impact on your career. They are about almost like playing the role of a coach, but from someone who's been there and is maybe a couple of steps ahead.
Yeah. And so we love, as an alternative, to find senior stakeholders in your organization, sponsors or champions, allies that can actively push for your success. And then, of course, we love to think of Powrsuit as where you can find your personal board of directors. And this is something where you surround yourself with people who have gone ahead of you, who are coming up behind you, who are at the same level as you, where you can seek advice from. They might share in your current challenges, or they might have been there, done that. Therefore, we love this concept of personal board of directors. And then there's something else that we love as well, which we meet with respectively.
A peer group. Yes. So I think we want to normalize the idea of getting a range of mentors. Like, rather than putting all your eggs in one basket, get a peer group, a professional board of directors. Surround yourself with a small but mighty group of people who have your back, your professional back, who are there to hold you accountable, give you support and advice, help you bounce ideas off, and really speak truth to you about, where you can improve, as well as when bad things happen or things don't go your way, to have your back as well, rather than the sort of flippant find a mentor like that's going to solve all your challenges at work.
Yeah. So the next time you hear that, maybe just think twice about where that piece of advice is coming from and start to consider a broader group of people whom you can confide in. Of course, we need those allies, sponsors, champions in the workplace.
And mentors.
Yep.
You need all of them.
Yep.
But not just one thing's going to solve the problem.
Number 2, Nat.
Change the way you look and speak. And this is a biggie because, like it or not, the way we present ourselves is a way people perceive where we fit in the professional world. And to this day, if you look at the top traits of leadership, there is one of them always falls, or more falls into this looking and acting, what we perceive a leader to look like.
Yeah. And we are doing an upcoming mini masterclass. It's actually this week, and it's on executive presence. It is loaded with bias, but in fact, it is a thing. And we're going to talk about the modern connotations and helpfulness of executive presence, how people perceive us. However, the outdated and biased form of that is that executive presence, if someone gave you that feedback, they were saying, act and speak more like a male. So look big, appear commanding, appear authoritative, speak with a lower tone, slower paced. I've heard all of this stuff before.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've been watching, as you know, Yellowstone, which is a very toxic show, but it's really helped me think a lot about
You have
gender.
not sold it, by the way.
Well,
you keep
no,
saying
but
you should watch it, and then every time we talk about it, it's toxic.
I'm obsessed with it because I just am watching it from the perspective of gender norms and how we are socialized to believe. So I would say the main character, the dad on the show, has a traditional version of executive presence. He is silent. He won't go to the doctor. He will, rip his own stitches out. He will never share his emotions. He always looks like he's pondering things. And when he speaks, everyone pays attention. And yet, when you watch it from the perspective of like executive presence being a bias-riddled sort of subjective label, you're just looking at him being like, I bet he's sitting on his porch thinking about nothing. I just sort of like look at it from a totally different point of view, being like, what if he was why they paint it out to look this way? But actually, what if it's not true? And I feel like watching some of those things and seeing how we're socialized to think about executive presence and things like, I couldn't even watch that other one. What was it? Succession. Another great example of what you think executive presence looks like. That's what we're taught to believe. So we, by default, then end up feeling like we have to change how we act. Yeah. And there's a caveat to this one, because I think we often talk about don't change the wine, but you can change the label depending on situations. So we've had this conversation, I think it was even with your daughter, was it, about turning up to a job and how you should dress for a job. Yeah. And I actually spoke to this incredible ally today, and he said, he called it, this woman he spoke to recently has a form of advanced game theory she has to go to every day when she goes to work around how do I dress appropriately to work to not look slutty but to look professional but not look too professional, and then when I turn up how do I and he's like, it is like an incredibly complicated game she has to walk through every day before she even gets to the office. So there's that extreme, and then the other extreme is your daughter saying, why do I have to dress, I don't remember what she said, I'm not going to put words in her mouth, but challenging almost why we dress professionally for work. And somewhere in the middle is the truth. And where would you think we fit on that?
Well, I love that authentic leadership is on the rise, and actually being yourself, including Oh, here I am at a loss for words again.
I
It's
mean, I was
how
before
you
I
what
could meet
manifest your
subjective.
personality in your wear. Like I think that is
Yeah.
hugely accepted more than ever post COVID. I remember a post coming out of Sydney and someone saying I've been to my first conference post COVID and nobody wore heels. Everyone was in flats. So I think we have gotten to a point where we can actually start to show our personality through our outfits. That could be bright, it could be fabulous accessories, but probably ripped jeans and a hoodie isn't appropriate for a lot of workplaces nowadays. And that's okay.
But I think I like this idea of changing the way you look and speak and look in the wine label analogy, because rather than this being a personal thing, it's a situational thing.
Yeah.
And we always see those examples, but I think it's really stark is if I'm going into a bank, into a boardroom of a bank, I would expect to dress differently than if I go into a boardroom of a very young tech company.
Yeah.
That is, and that's nothing to do with me. That is what those two groups look for. And you get to choose how far down those paths you go.
Absolutely.
However, things like changing how tall you are, how thin you are, how high your voice is, that stuff is like, to me, it's red herrings, because the actual solution to this is to normalize a whole range of different voices, different heights, different weights.
Yeah.
And so I think we're going to have much more luck changing the world by actually embracing and stepping into what our strengths and who we are as people, rather than defaulting to or trying to look more like what we're expected to look like, because we're just recreating the problem for the next generation.
I agree. One thing we do encourage, though, is sometimes removing the apologetic language that we have been socialized to, just be deferent and and maybe this, or I think maybe this. And so the issues in the workplace are not caused by your apologetic language. However, we should be normalizing women's pitch, tone, and speed, but own it, try and remove the qualifiers. But look, at the end of the day, speak freely and speak in a way that is natural to you.
Yeah, I love that one. Because I think there are things we can all do. We talk about turning your video camera on. We talk about a bunch of stuff that makes you, shows you to be interested, curious, and engaged.
Yeah.
And those are the things we should be focused on, rather than if only you just spoke a little bit deeper, you would make it.
The next one to your opening, I suppose, story was achieve work-life balance, and this eternal quest for us to all achieve this, in which all of the questions come up when we chat with seasoned leaders who've been there and done that. We've had the questions many of times. How do you achieve work-life balance? This is a systemic issue because men aren't told to find work-life balance. We are. And I'm going to tell a story of a news clip that I saw the other night. And I'm not going to say which coach it is because it is a well-known coach in New Zealand. It is a woman who is coaching a sport, because they were saying, what are your next steps? You've done so well. The team has done incredibly well. And she said, well, I've got kids, so I'm not going to put my hand up to coach the national team, but I'm looking forward to another season, and maybe eventually in the future I will. And I just thought, in what world, and great for her, if that's what she wants to do, amazing. But in what world would a man have ever said that? I'm not going to coach the national team of a sports team because I've got kids.
Yeah, I find it really interesting because I think we've talked about this a lot, even with women quitting their corporate work to start their own businesses. On an individual level, amazing. But when you see it always happening with one gender, that's where you go, this is a systemic challenge. And one antidote to that I've seen a lot more of recently that I love is just switch genders out. So if someone says, oh, you're becoming a mum, how are you going to balance it all? Suggest saying that back, well, in your own head, if nothing else. Oh, so you're becoming a dad, how are you going to manage it all? And if that doesn't feel like a thing people would say, then it's definitely advice you shouldn't, or words we should sort of banish from, like, let them go out the other ear.
Yeah, and we were just chatting last week, and that my generation, I'm older than you, Nat, was the first Gen X was the first generation in history that was told they could do anything. And it was true. We could go do anything. So all of the women, of course, got to go to uni, got to choose whatever pathways we wanted to take, and absolutely we could lean into our careers. However, my brother, no fault of my mum's, but the boys that were in Gen X were not told that they could do anything in arenas outside of work to lessen the load on us in the workplace.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. Maybe these days, I know a lot of my friends are teaching that to their boys, but I don't think it was millennials either. I think one group of us got told we could do everything, and the other group still got taught to stay in their gender lane.
Yeah.
And that's led to women taking on everything, which is a real shame. Yeah, it's interesting. This one about achieving work life balance, I actually think work life balance at a micro level is a myth anyway. Like, you don't have it day to day. It's like over time. There are weeks where you're going to be working crazy hours and weeks where you're going to be on holiday. And the goal is that over time you have a nice balance of things rather than day to day. But I think this one, and we're digging into this a lot at the moment, on Parkinson's law, this idea that you need all this time to be able to do big roles, or that having children really limits your ability to take things on if you're a woman. And there is really good evidence to suggest that that's actually completely untrue. That's just a limiting belief, and that actually people who have less time are far more productive in that time. And that actually some of these narratives that we're told, like, and I get why you noticed that on that interview, because we're reinforcing them. And actually, why? Like, you can say, I don't feel like it at the moment because I'm choosing to take a bit of time with my kids. But to say I can't do both as a blanket rule feels like we just keep reinforcing it.
And also, I think when you do ask people that say, how have you been able to do it all? Invariably, they say, well, I'm so fortunate to have had a partner. And I've caught myself saying it. I have an equal partner in life. And we're so lucky. And you're all like, well, we're
They're
not
helping you.
You're helping me have a career. If anything, that should be a trigger. If you're raising boys, if you have a partner, to start those conversations about the split of partnerhood in a relationship and who is doing what, and also modeling that for your boys.
Yeah, I love it. So this achieving work-life balance thing, firstly, work-life balance can be a bit of a myth day to day. Secondly, it's very gendered. If we're getting told to do a bunch of stuff that men aren't being told to do, we should really always be challenging that anyway. And then thirdly, there is like these limiting beliefs we put in our paths as a result of these narratives. That's like, let them go. Like, instead of just repeating those one-liners about work-life balance and not having enough time, actually spend the time to sit down and go, what could it look like? Because, gosh, I feel like if that alone was women stepping up into bigger roles or taking on the national team or whatever it was, just giving it a whirl, I reckon, I mean, I know I wouldn't necessarily want to put my hand up to do that experiment if I was a brand new mum, but I genuinely think the outcomes of that experiment would be that everyone was fine doing those jobs.
Yeah.
And they just got on and did them. And they found that they could fit their work into the time, and they did it differently. And yet we've just been sort of holding ourselves back with this work-life balance thing at the moment.
And possibly in this, what I would consider a transition phase in this generation, where we go from is an unequal split to something that's a touch more fair and equitable. Hopefully that is the next generation coming through. I do think it's actually not a terrible idea to look at the organization you're in, look at who's leading it, look at what they're modeling, look at the policies they have in place. And if you can't find it there, where they are supporting who you are at work and outside of work, there are incredible organizations. And, you know, I'm not suggesting that all female-led organizations are great, but they have likely been through this in terms of getting to the top as a woman, possibly with children. They will understand and probably, hopefully, statistically, have put into place a bunch of great policies to support women moving up the career ladder.
Well, and modelling, because remember Rhiannon McKinnon, she was one of our expert interviews, and she said she was mortified during COVID lockdown because she was doing an all-hands meeting and her kids were sort of crawling all over her. And she said afterwards that was the one thing, even as she left that role, people pointed to as being a highlight. And she said her perception of it was so different, but that people saw the CEO modelling, this is what it looks like to work and parent, and it's okay, and it gave them all permission. So I think it's, you're looking for those traits, be it women or men at the top, that they are modeling taking time off to be with their kids, equally sharing sick days if they need to, all that sort of stuff, if that's a thing that's a consideration. But even if you don't have kids, I don't have kids, but achieving work-life balance is still incredibly important. Not being the one who has to pick up the slack because everyone else has to race home to have their kids. Like, this is important for all of us.
Totally. Number 4. This is an interesting one because I'm pretty sure I've said it, and this is fake it till you make it. What do you think about this one?
I hate that line.
Oh.
Yeah.
I've probably used it in the past.
I think it's another throwaway one-liner, and I just think it's the same, like it's my thing about gut feeling as well. It's like you're not faking it. You're using all your expertise and experiences to date to figure out the next step. And you might be a beginner and you might be learning something, but you're not a fake and you're not an imposter. And I feel like that fake it till you make it is an attitude that leads to the things like mindset of like the person who can BS the most gets into the position. And I just find that it's not, Yeah,
well, this goes to, I think, my earlier point of authentic leadership, and that we are embracing all different styles of leaders and what they look like and how they show up at work. They aren't faking it. They are actually showing up as who they are. They are highlighting their achievements, their goals. They're being honest in terms of their personal brand. They're speaking up about what they've accomplished. So they're not faking it. They are just embracing who they are, what they've done, and they're bringing that to the forefront.
Yeah.
And yes, they feel nervous, because I think that actually is a sentence to go, it's okay that you're scared. It's okay. So I think there is something in going, you're allowed to feel those feelings.
Yeah, I prefer like embrace a beginner's mindset or the expectation when you pick a new job or a new opportunity that you're actually not meant to know everything on day one, and normalizing that rather than this idea of faking it till you make it. So I feel like it's something we all say, we've all said it, and it's, I don't know, it can't, I agree with you. Imposter syndrome, the wrong people getting to the positions, feeling like you can't just own the experience you've already got.
Meh.
It's a dumb one.
Great. You close out with this biggie, this one.
Oh, this is our absolute favorite. Women are told this all the time. It's actually what has been behind a lot of initiatives around diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is to help women be more confident. So we're often told, be more confident when you walk into the meeting, be more confident when you turn up to work, be more confident putting your hand up for jobs. I mean, confidence, ugh.
Yeah. Now, what I would invite everyone is, we did quite a popular, one of our more popular podcasts was on confidence and how it's weaponized for women. That's episode number 35. Please do take a listen. We're not going to rehash it all.
This is Savant Kristen, episode 35.
No, I did go find it. But please go and listen to that. We won't rehash it all. But another thing we did do, Nat and I were in Queenstown a couple weeks ago, and we did a talk on the syndroming of women. And it's the same thing, that we are placing these labels on women to go fix themselves rather than recognize the worlds that we inhabit, the workplaces we go into, the systems that we're in. Sometimes, frankly, they're broken and we don't belong. And our, faking it and our confidence is not going to fix it.
No, and I think going back again to that story at the start about you can't have it all, is how you can be the most confident person in the world. You can back yourself as much as you like. And I think when you look at little girls, they do have that. Like, I just look at that generation now and I'm just like, they own the world and they know it. However, as you go through your life and career and people say you can't have it all, or you don't look the part, or get yourself a mentor and that will help you overcome systemic bias, that chips away at your confidence. And you're just using logic. You're just going, maybe I'm not as good as I thought, or maybe I do need extra support. Maybe there is something wrong with me. So, and then it gets thrown back at you being like, why aren't you confident? And you're like, oh God, all these things that you've told me about why I'm not good enough.
And we often talk about this difference between confidence and competence. And in fact, hiring the most confident person is usually, who is historically has been a man, is not necessarily, I think, one of the more popular Harvard Business Review articles was like, how many mediocre men were in leadership roles and how the hell did we get here? It's because we hired those that were confident as opposed to competence and letting our work speak for ourselves. And so we are huge fans of advocating for ourselves, building personal brand, stating who we are, the work we've done, and all of that stuff. And therefore self-awareness is required there, and believing in ourselves and how the world could benefit from our value. But men could actually benefit from, this concept of, cool it on the confidence.
Well, not over everything that's overachiever, overconfident. Nothing that's over is actually very good either. But I do think with confidence, like I love the confidence competence thing, because if I'm hiring for competence, I'm hiring for someone who can do the job. If I'm hiring for confidence, I'm hiring for someone who believes they can do the job. And while both of those things have to come into play, the thing that I really need is the job done. So competence every day of the week. But if you can start to recognize that the world, how it's been built, these systems, we've talked about how workplace was designed before women participated in it. Same with the financial industry. If we can start to recognize that actually the barriers we face to success are higher, that means sometimes we've had to battle a lot more, which sometimes makes us feel like when you're looking around thinking maybe it's me because I'm finding it harder. That is not a lack of confidence. That is that you've actually had to overcome more hurdles. And if you're ever told you should be more confident, it's always a good idea to ask for what specific things you can do differently, because confidence, like executive presence, these are labels that are subjective and mean different things to different people. So if you're told about confidence, ask to be more confident. What is the specific? Is it putting your hand up? Is it speaking up in meetings? Get tangible, actionable things that you can change, and then question whether or not you need to.
Yes, please. So catch yourself the next time you're giving people advice or you hear this. Find a mentor. Change the way you speak and look. In a number of different terms, of course. Achieve work-life balance. Yes, you can. Fake it till you make it and be more confident. These should all be red flag terms, not very helpful for women. And then I just wanted to do a quick plug, actually. Nat and I have been going around both in New Zealand and Australia, and happy to do many other countries speaking gigs. And it's something we do. We run workshops, but we also have keynotes, and we'd love to not only speak at your organization, but at the events that you're going to and that you love, what is in your calendar. So reach out at hello@powrsuit.com, because we'd love to meet you in person.
You can hear that over the noise of the wind.
It's pretty stormy. So get in touch, and we'd love to speak at your next thing or run a workshop. We're charming.
We are charming.
Yeah.
We love to hear some of the bad advice we've been given. It's sometimes it can be a bit funny and cathartic to just share some terrible advice you've been given.
Agreed. Look forward to hearing from you, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.
Bye.